Mike Grimm, voice of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Mike, how are we doing this morning?
Yeah, doing great. Doing great. We got a nice rain shower rolling through the Twin Cities right now, and hopefully it doesn't rain tomorrow night for the football game.
I was gonna say, do we have a projected weather report on how the weather's supposed to look tomorrow night?
I think there is a chance for rain. Actually, I'm just hoping no lightning and no delay. I've seen enough of those over the years. But let's, a few raindrops never killed anybody, so let's hope that if it is, it's just a rain shower.
Well,
but yeah, there's a possibility of some rain.
Well, Mike, if it's raining, that might mean that you're going to have to run the football, which isn't something that Minnesota has been doing very well.
It's amazing. Like, if you'd asked me, last year or even in August, if the Gophers in back-to-back home games, now the Ohio State game was in between there, but in back-to-back home games you had Rutgers and Purdue, and a P.J. Fleck coach team would throw the ball 86 times combined. I would have thought you guys were all nuts, but that's what happened. And they have not been able to run the ball very effectively, as you said. And I think the fact that the Gopher coaching staff has enough confidence in this redshirt freshman quarterback, I never thought I'd see a day where P.J. Fleck would just simply abandon the run. And they have at a couple of different games. And they've done it to wins, come from behind wins for that matter. So it is a different looking team. But at some point, and as you get to November, as you guys know, when you're playing in the Big Ten, you're going to have to be able to hand off the ball and move the sticks. And so somewhere along the line, the Gophers are going to have to figure it out.
Mike, so you brought up Drake Lindsey, talented redshirt freshman quarterback. How much of the sort of shift in offensive philosophy has to do, like with what you said, the faith they have in him versus maybe there's some of the struggles they've had on the offensive line in being able to get the push they need to run the football? Because I do think I do kind of like your backs a little bit in Taylor and Ijuboy, but also, do you think that changes it all when you look at a Nebraska team where throwing it is kind of going into Nebraska's strengths and running it has been a place where people have been able to have some opportunities?
Yeah, I think all of that is true, and I think that for Minnesota to try to win the game, they're going to have to figure out a way to get some yards on the ground. That pass defense, as you mentioned, is so good for Nebraska. But in terms of the change of philosophy, I wouldn't say it's an overall change, but I think specific to a game, if the game is there to be won and you're not running the ball, and you feel good about your quarterback, you'll switch to letting that kid throw it because you like him and because he's proven that he has got a nice arm and he's got a pretty good handle for a young guy on the game and on game management and all of that. So I think some of it has to do with the quarterback, no question. Some of it has to do with the with the need to do what you got to do to win a game. If this were a guy that maybe there's been some times in the past where maybe they haven't had as much confidence in a quarterback. I don't think they would have thrown the ball 45 times like they did last Saturday night against Purdue. But I think, and a lot of it's a short passing game, so it's almost the old cliche now. It's a newer term, but you hear it so much. It's an old cliche now. Is sometimes a little 4-yard pass is as good as a handoff, and so there is a lot of short passes in this new look, I guess, for the Gophers, where they're trying to get some high percentage plays that would equate to the running game. And you're right about Darius Taylor. He's one of the top backs in the conference. Statistically, you wouldn't think it, though, looking at it. He's really struggled. Last week, how about this for a stat? I think it was Pro Football Focus threw a stat out that Darius Taylor had 36 yards after contact last week, and he finished the game with 33 yards. So, but what does that tell you? That tells you that something's not getting blocked very well up front, and he had some carries that were negative yards. And so, yeah, they got to figure something out. And I don't think it's just the linemen. I think the defenses have gotten comfortable with the idea that there's not an outside threat. And I don't mean that by receivers. I mean on a particular run play, there's usually something, particularly the Gophers have been under center more this year than they have in the past. And if you're going to go under center, to me, you got to run some bootlegs. You got to run something that's going to keep the safeties or linebackers and ends honest on something. And they have not done that much. It's been a lot of straight handoffs. And I think the trend then is these defenses are like, look, they're going to hand the ball off. There's nothing else here. And so I'm not a coach, so I don't know how to do it, but, in terms of evaluate it. But a couple of plays last week and rewatching that game, I rewound. There was one play in particular was loss of like 3 yards on a handoff, and I rewound it like 5-6 times, and every lineman was blocking somebody. but there were 3 or 4 other guys that were coming in. I mean, the blocking seemed to be effective, but I think the defense is like, well, we have no worries about anything other than tackling that running back. There's not going to be a bootleg. There's not going to be an end around. A lot of teams have often done the fake jet action where you fake that handoff first, and then it freezes you for a second. Gophers have done none of that, so I think strategically they maybe have to try a few things to make sure that there's just not 8 guys attacking Darius Taylor. And then something they talked about this week, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds because I don't know anything about it, is the redshirt freshman quarterback. Apparently with their running game, there's certain reads on a pre-snap, and then he has to identify and shift into what running play they want. And apparently there's been a few where he's maybe misjudged what he saw, and that's resulted in a few problems as well. So they've been working with him, showing him a lot of film, trying to get them into the right run play.
That makes quite a bit of sense. As you look at Taylor, obviously he had the hamstring injury, kept him out a few games. How healthy does he look to you? Is there concerns of that lingering a little bit as that, I know he's had issues with his hamstrings in the past.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think you hit it. That he looks great. Like he had a 40-yard screen pass the other day where, he looks like he should be playing for the Vikings instead of the Gophers, right? Just an incredible, sprint down the sideline, setting up blocks, being patient, then using speed and burst when you had to. It was incredible. And look, the scouts love him. I mean, you look at the projected running, he's eligible now. He's a junior, so he's eligible. And so in any of these eligible lists, he's a guy that everyone thinks would be drafted. So that tells, he caught 54 passes last year. So the NFL in today's game loves that, idea. He hasn't caught as many passes this year, but as you mentioned, he's missed games. So to answer the question, he looks great, fast, strong. There was 1 or 2 plays maybe where he lost his balance when I think traditionally he wouldn't have. I think that was more conditioning. I think, getting back into game shape is different, get those legs going. So I think another week of that's good. That said, when these hamstrings, and he's had this now 3 times in his 3 years, a hamstring injury, there is something about it, recurring problems, right? So to me, the fear is it's always a fear, whether you're 100% or, nowadays you don't play on a hamstring until you get to 100%. I don't know how many Minnesota Twins fans you have in Omaha or Lincoln, but there's a kid named Royce Lewis for the Twins who has been this rising star, and now he's kind of hit neutral for about a year and a half, and a lot of it because he just keeps blowing his hamstring, and that's a fear with this guy, no doubt. And but he looks great as of right here, right now, and tomorrow night he's 100%.
On the other side of the ball, in terms of stopping the run, that's been an issue for Minnesota as well. Obviously, Devin Mockabee had a great start to or a great game against them, and Purdue in general ran the ball pretty effectively. What's the level of concern after seeing Emmett Johnson go for 176 yards last week that run defense could be an Achilles heel?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because the Gopher coaching staff has not been as concerned about it as you would think they might be, and I think some of it is they realize, look, this isn't Ohio State personnel that they're coaching out there in terms of defense. Now there's some good players; they're going to be NFL players on this defense, but it's not like, hey, we can stop the run and the pass all at once. So strategically, game plan wise, they're doing a few things. They did it against Rutgers and they did it against Purdue, where they're going to play 8 in coverage often. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that a little tomorrow night. And when you do that, they're going to give up some rushing yards, and they did against Purdue. Their running back their running back Mockabee, and then they did against Rutgers as well. That guy had 100 yards. His name's escaping me off the top of my head, but Felton, I think, was his name maybe. But anyway, really they gave up some yards. But their theory was, we can't stop everything. I mean, we have good players, but we're not Ohio State. So we have to play some game plan shenanigans here to try to make sure that we thwart drives. So they were willing to give up some 8 or 10 yard gains over the course of a drive and play 8 in coverage and say, look, we don't think Purdue's just going to hand it off every time. And so eventually they're either going to throw one to us or they're going to throw enough incompletes they're going to have to punt. And now they gave up only 20 points against this Purdue team. They gave up 450 yards. 20's as low as it's been in the Big Ten for them. So in essence, I mean, I think they're okay giving up some yards, and they're basically daring teams to try to, complete enough passes and not throw it to them because they are a ball hawking defense. They will intercept the pass. And Rutgers did the same thing. I mean, Rutgers quarterback Ethan Kaligmanis, who was he was the former Gopher, probably should have had 5 interceptions in that game. But the Gophers dropped a couple. And so I think part of it's strategy. But I also think that Nebraska is maybe more willing. I think, frankly, the other night, if Purdue just keeps handing the ball off, they probably win the football game. But the theory is that no coach wants to just do that. They want to make it last. They want to make it quicker. The scoring drive. Let's move the ball through the air. We got a great quarterback, and so we'll see what Nebraska decides to do tomorrow and what Minnesota decides to do tomorrow. Because Nebraska certainly has a great balanced offense, as you mentioned, with Johnson, and then Raiola obviously through the air has been obviously he's living up to that billing for sure right now.
You talk about Raiola through the air. Nebraska leads the Big Ten in yards after catch with 1,076, and Minnesota's been a little shaky in the tackling department. Is that another concern? You talk about the run defense, but the pass defense, although they do, get a lot of interceptions and they're looking to be a defense that takes the ball away, is there a concern that maybe taking some of those chances and missing on those tackles against a team like Nebraska that's been catching the ball and running a long way is something that could backfire on the Gophers?
Yeah, that's the number one issue, I think, is tackling. They have missed tackles. Now, that said, the secondary guys have been pretty good tacklers. The linebacking core, and I like them, they're all good, and they all have a lot of tackles. But I think if you'd watch games, you'd say they should have more. They have missed some tackles. They've missed some fits. They've been out of position a little bit. And look, tomorrow night they're not going to, you can't afford to miss, a bunch of tackles and have guys bounce off you and all of that. So I think the missed tackle thing is a concern, especially in the run game. That's where it seems to have been a bigger deal. The fear just generally, though, of course, is the explosive play, and Nebraska's been very good at that. And much of that, as you mentioned, is yards after the catch. And so the key to me will be tackling tomorrow. Tackle the running back, tackle the receiver or tight end when he catches it, tackle the quarterback when you have a chance to make a sack. That was the other thing last week. Ryan Brown for Purdue probably could have been sacked 10 times. Maybe that's a little bit of a hyperbole, but not that much of a hyperbole. And he was able to avoid tackles. And some weren't even, I would necessarily call them missed tackles. They were just like, keep the guy contained, right? I mean, and Raiola, while he's not going to be, confused for J.C. Watts from old Oklahoma days, he can move, right? I mean, he can move. I thought you old Big 8 guys would appreciate an Oklahoma reference this morning, but anyway, I don't know why that name popped into my head. Him and Billy Sims, I was like 6 years old, and that's when I started watching football in the wishbone. But anyway, I digress. Raiola's not J.C. Watts, but he's also not, a statue back there. He can move. He can avoid pressure, and Brown did that last week a lot. And so the key to me is linebackers got to tackle the running back. Defensive backs have to tackle the receivers and tight ends when they make catches. And then if you got a chance to sack the kid. Don't let him get out of the pocket and extend the playoff schedule, which is I think you guys obviously see him more than I see him, but to me it seems like that has been a strength. Slide up in the pocket, roll right, roll left. If you're flushed, extend the playoff schedule and throw it downfield. And when need be, instead of an 8-yard sack, take a 2-yard gain on a scramble. And so the Gophers, when they got him corralled, they need to keep him corralled. I think tackling is the number one thing. I think you hit on it with that question.
Mike, appreciate the time. Have a great call, and we'll hopefully talk to you again soon.
All right. Always enjoy, guys. Thank you. Looking forward to the game tomorrow.
There you go. That is Mike Grimm, the play-by-play voice of Minnesota football, Minnesota basketball.